moment to solidify because the signal I had at the farm today was horrible. So we're putting in the miles to come up here and get a better signal to do this really quick. It's a rainy, stormy day, and I've not put on any makeup, so you're just going to have to deal with what I look like. But chapter 2 was intense. It's a lot of information. My hair. It's a lot of information, and it's where you have to kind of reread to, you know, make sure you're taking what you need to know about who you need to know about. And it's kind of, you're acquiring, in chapter 2, you're acquiring the information that you need to kind of lay the foundation for the research experimentation they did with the electrical impulses during this time. Ow, hang on, my hair is killing me. So I'm going to give everybody a minute to pop in here because my signal was so bad the other day. And I apologize, but there wasn't a whole lot in chapter 1. Chapter 1 was actually pretty doggone small, and it was, you know, but it was just making sure that you knew the names, knew the time frame, knew the big players and how society reacted to the electrical testing. That was what was really important in chapter 1. So I'm going to leave chapter 1 as it stands. So if you're new to this, this is a series that I'm starting, and I will eventually create a playlist on the Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life by Arthur Furstenberg. It's a whopper of a book. And if you like what I'm doing, listen, Ko-Fi will not let my husband have any kind of social media. I've got a June bug in my house. How did I get a June bug in my house? How the actual crap did I get a June bug in my house? Anyway, Ko-Fi will not allow my husband to have a Ko-Fi because he's a trapper and tanner, and they say that when he shows the animals and the furs he creates is graphic. Okay, I make faces and I don't care what I look like, so y'all are going to get used to me real quick. Irritates the bejesus. Like, he had a page for less than 24 hours and they shut it down. You know, so this is, even if he shows his leather products, it's going to be graphic. So if you want to help support me buying these expensive books, the next one I'm looking at is like a $70 to $80 book on eBay. You can imagine what it is in the bookstores. And I'm just trying to find one on auction somewhere. If you want to help my husband help me get this stuff, because he helps me acquire my craft stuff and the stuff I research, because my medical care takes basically all my money. And I think I'm learning a lot about my own medical care in this. So be prepared. But if you want to help, you can go to my husband's Etsy store, which is Hillbilly Heart Decor. You just type in www.etsy.com/shop/Hillbilly Heart Decor. Browse. Some of the art that I give him as payback for the crafting stuff that he gets me, the furs that he lets me have to create things, he has in there. Some of the jewelry I make, he has in there. But he has, you know, his furs and stuff that he creates in there as well. And that's like the best way if you want to show us thanks for doing all this and buying these books and teaching y'all what we teach you. That's the best way to help him, because I do kind of financially drain him when I get into a very research thick or crafting thick momentum. So I feel kind of sorry for him, because he won't tell me no, because he knows this is important. But I do feel bad because I really do use a lot of money sometimes trying to figure what's going on in the world around me, because I need to know. So this is chapter 2, and this part of this book, yes, I'm from the U.S. I'm from the South, if you can't tell. I'm from Tennessee. The part of this book is very interesting. And chapter 2 was titled The Deaf to Hear, the Lame to Walk. And in it, the first paragraph, I said, you know, make sure you read this first paragraph to them. So I'm going to read you the first paragraph, which I marked in the book. You can see my parentheses marks around it. It says, the Burmese elephant has the same set of genes, whether it toils in a logging camp or runs free in the forest, but its DNA will not tell you the details of its life. In the same way, electrons cannot tell you what is most interesting about electricity. Like elephants, electricity has been forced to bear our burdens and move great loads, and we've worked out more or less precisely its behavior while in captivity. But we must not be fooled into believing we know everything important about the lives of its wild cousins. I thought that was an interesting parallel to draw. So electricity and a Burmese elephant, one is tame, one is wild. Electricity, they look at it the same way. One is tame, one is wild. I thought that was pretty interesting. So we went on in this chapter to learn how ignorant we still are today about electricity. It says science is still ignorant about really the source of thunder and lightning. They have theories and they project those theories. What causes clouds to become electrified in the first place and storm, why the earth has a magnetic field at all, how our brains work, how our nerves function, and how body growth is choreographed. We still really do not understand these things. We have working theories, but we don't have the finite knowledge that most of us in society probably thinks that the medical field and the scientific realm has. So why does modern science fail to care about researching more about electricity's effect on life? They seem to stress just have low exposure to electricity, so don't go grab a hot wire. We all know that, the dangers of electricity. Why do they promote the dangers of electricity, but they don't promote the knowledge and then further research to get more knowledge? And as I kind of did some Google fingers researching, I realized that there's like a chasm in the research field on electrical impulse data. And you can find some stuff if you get into like my alumni library and you get into those really detailed peer-reviewed journals. But it's very limited what you can find. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird because we have all this research money, we have all this funding, and we have all this ability to learn this. Why are we not trying to grow on what these previous doctors and physicians have put in play for us? Because it's very important what they have gleaned from electricity. Now, listen, I do bullet points, so we're going to compost a lot of knowledge that was not terribly fun to read during this chapter. I'm going to try to tell you the more fun parts that will stick and help you have the basis for the next few chapters. But chapter 2 was overall a little bit of a sludge fest. You just had to get through it. So it says, when did mainstream science and society lose their thirst for understanding that what they called the mimic of the life force? That was kind of the big question that the reader had going into this chapter. In 18th century Europe, medicine looked like this: bleeding, purging, vomiting, blistering, and even mercury poisoning. That was what was healing at the time. That was what healing looked like in the 18th century in Europe. So it is kind of a duh when they saw electricity that can do all those same things to the human body, and they thought, we're going to put it in the healing category. It created a lot of the same issues in the body: bleeding, purging, vomiting, blistering, looking like you had been poisoned. So I understand when they saw the effects of electricity in their time, it mimicked their medicine. And so I get why they were like, oh crap, we got to look into this. Maybe that's why the results of electrocution in their testing looked so casual to them and permissible, and they continued to research rather heavily, specifically in Europe, Germany. So the funny thing is that electric medicine, it remained attractive until the 20th century, but it went through lulls. And around the 1800s, between 1800 and 1810, electrotherapy, it kind of fell out of population. And this was due to cults in Europe. Cults in Europe. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of explanation in that, but what it did explain was that there were huge masses of the population that had been finagled and hoodooed into thinking that magnetic healing and electrical healing was not working, because Anton Mesmer and his magnetic healing, and Elisha Perkins and his electric tractors, which was like a 3-inch long electric metal rod that they used to hold over what they thought was diseased areas in the bodies. They were not actually magnetic or electric at all. So these two charlatans kind of turned the European social base against this type of medicine for a while. But there was a resurgence in electrotherapy around the 1850s, and by 1880, over 10,000 American doctors were implementing it in their practices on a very routine schedule. So the funny thing that I found in this is that when they started to test for electrical responses in the body and what it could do, and if patients that were subjected to electrical impulses would heal quicker or heal at all, they said that there was around an 84% success rate. Now, they also say that this could have been exaggerated by the doctors at the time and the society at the time, but there was one area where it really stood out, and that was in people that were deaf. So people that were deaf became kind of the guinea pigs for electrical research. So in 1851, a neurologist, and I'm going to butcher these names because I'm from Appalachia. Okay, I'm going to try. But if you know how to say them, good for you. I may not. We're just going to wing it. So in 1851, neurologist, and it looks like Guillaume. I'm assuming it's like a William Benjamin Duchesne, and it's de Bologna. I'm about called him Mr. Baloney. Mr. Duchesne de Bologna. He was a renowned kind of researcher doctor. He developed like methods of physical exam that they still use today, and he was the first physician to take a biopsy from a living person and use it for diagnosis. Like he's still renowned, so he was a good guy. He published the first accurate clinical description of polio as well, and he's got a lot of diseases still named for him. He diagnosed with electricity something called the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And he used electricity in a lot of his research, but he was very much unwilling to really be a center of attention around electricity. He was more concerned about his patients and not about the fame. He was trying to treat individuals and not think of like society as a whole. So he was really like individual patient oriented. So, you know, he understood that there was a very common improvement in the majority of his patients when electric therapy was used. And he even went to Paris and held treatments for deaf people in Paris that had what they called nerve deafness, or they either had nerve deafness or they were made deaf by overdoses of like quinine, which was like a fever reducer at the time. They had a lot of medicines that were not truly medicines at the time, or they didn't understand the harms of them. But he had a lot of success in bringing back the hearing of people that had nerve damage deafness or overdose deafness from quinine, which is kind of the same thing, but it just a different avenue of exposure. His results are even so popular they're listed in court documents. That's how factual they are. Hi, everybody. We're on chapter 2, and it's a doozy. The thing that Duchesne and a later German guy named Springer had in common, that they used amplification of current, and it was very simple, and they would use current for 4 minutes in the inner ear, and they would do pulses 1 second apart for 4 minutes in each ear. And they also used electrodes placed on the tragus. I've never had my tragus pierced, but I have had my dates pierced before for migraines. So I can understand. And the tragus is kind of like those bone ear things you wear, bone conducting sound earbuds, ear headsets. So they used electrodes placed on the tragus, the inside of the canal, and then the mastoid back here. Y'all know that I know what the mastoid is. I've had mastoiditis multiple times. It is very dangerous and can turn into meningitis. So your mastoid is this big knob bone back here behind your ear, and it can hold fluid and swell and get infected, and then it can cause meningitis and kill you. So this is filling in a lot of the blanks for me and some of my issues. And I'm like, well, gee, I'm just going to go and start looking at electricity for healing myself now. But even 50 years before the Springer guy, there was a Johann Lindholt who had restored hearing with great success also. So electricity, when they started pulling all this research that was known, they found that in the late 1700s and early 1800s, it had been used successfully, routinely successfully, to bring back hearing. And it was very simple and just used a small current that was amplified and 4 minutes of treatment in each ear. Yeah, we're going to get to that, Samsonite. This is really neat how it started out so humbly and it's turned into something, but I still think that there's more they know that we don't know they know, because they've not sat stagnant for this long on findings like this. I don't believe it for 5 seconds. So what Lindholt and Duchesne and Springer all realized, they used a galvanic current, which just means metal-induced, iron, zinc, silver. And then they used electropiles. So they were touching you with like metal rods, basically. Duchesne used alternating current and an industrial coal. But there was a British surgeon, Michael Lebaume. He used a friction machine, and that was around 1810. So they had various ways of introducing the electricity to the body. But all these ways were very simple, brief, and painless. Like the patients did not have any trauma afterwards, and it was highly successful. Then as the chapter progressed, we go into the secondary component called tasting electricity. So electrotherapy was also used in the blind. And what it was that when they found out that it could augment hearing and stuff, they wanted to then spread it across all 5 tactile senses, because they thought, well, if it affects one, it probably affects all of them. So here we go. We're just going to push this, and we're going to see how far we can take this. It's funny, though, because modern medicine doesn't seem to want us to know anything about electricity in our 5 senses. I mean, modern medicine doesn't want us to know anything about our senses. Let's just be honest. How many times have we been left really more confused or even dumbed down when we leave a doctor's appointment and we ask a question about how something affects one of our main senses? I know that when I was going through my neuromuscular onset, the first 6 to 8 years, I had a horrible nerve pain. And while they could explain why I was having nerve pain, they couldn't find any way to stop it. They knew how it occurred, knew what it was, but they said they had no way to stop the nerve pain. And that I would be in nerve pain until the nerves died, which some of my nerves have died. I can't feel most of my left leg, the bottom of my left foot. And that's where I was attacked with that axe when I was a wilderness boot camp counselor. And I had to save those other 13 kids and that other counselor from the boy that was crazed. I should write a book. Anyway, they could tell me everything about my disorder except how to correct it or stop the pain, which I thought was rather weird. Because normally if you put so much effort in having so much knowledge about something, it's because you're getting a payout somewhere. And when did they stop trying to even discuss my nerve pain with me? When I refused to take the medications they wanted to push down my throat. Mostly it was like a gabapentin medication that would just wreck your brain. I've got too much information in my brain. I did 6 years of college, master's in psychology. I have done counseling and therapy and medical transcription, nuclear med transcription. I've supervised murderers and sex offenders for the state of Tennessee. I've prosecuted parole warrants. I have taught cognitive behavioral therapy. I've got a lot of stuff crammed in here. And sometimes it's a curse. Most of them it's a blessing. And I'm not about to take a medication that's going to augment what I retain, my retention or future retention of the knowledge I wish to hang on to. So I was not taking a lot of this medication that did not have long-term research, and especially did not have any neurological research based behind it. And what I could find was negative. So that's when they stopped wanting to give me information at all, is when I deemed and veered off their path of normal medicine maintenance. I don't think you maintain something that's going wrong. I think you combat it. I wasn't about to maintain my nerve pain. It didn't seem like a good plan. But anyway, doctors still have no knowledge of why most people are electrically sensitive, and some people are super electrically sensitive. Okay, I believe you're right. And I think it is, they changed a lot of the coding in the early 2000s for medical billing purposes. That's when they actually renamed my disorder for coding purposes. Bullcrap. Anyway, for billing purposes. But that's also when they changed a lot of other words, such as instead of spontaneous miscarriage, they now write it in your medical billing as abortion. We know that a spontaneous miscarriage and an abortion are two very separate things. But medically, they try to have merged. And we've talked about vocabulary, vernacular, and how it changes society and shapes society and imprisons society. So, yeah, we're going to be getting into that too. But along this time came Alexander von Humboldt. And he was mostly an explorer, and he liked mines and stuff. But he was like dead set to resolve this electric mystery. So he performed some of the most notorious research, but it was also the first research to give like systemic research for diagnosis. So he found out while working in the Amazon with Amazonian peoples and their land and stuff, he found out a bunch of theories and wrote and developed the 5-volume karmas. And what this did was it attempted to unify all existing scientific knowledge around the world. How successful do you think this man was? I mean, just 5 years ago, we were trying to learn about a cold that was amplified, in a laboratory, and we were screwed 6 ways to Sunday. So he was probably about as successful, bless his heart. But he had good theories. He wanted to unify all scientific knowledge so we could all move forward. And he wanted to know if electricity was this life force they talked about, because it kept coming up in the mines, in the cultures and the villages he visited. And the theories in Europe were gaining popularity again after the brief lull, and it was becoming a mainstream social, conversation. And so people were actively trying to resolve this. And by this time, Italy had moved in, and they had invented the first electric battery. Apparently, I let in a June bug and a wasper when I went outside. If I get up and run, you know why. It's coming right at me. I hate waspers. When it lights, I go smack it. It's going to get my ceiling fan to get me, though. It's going to get spun out and pop. Yeah, go into the kitchen. Stay in there. Go to the light. I'll get you in a minute. Okay, so in Italy, they created the first 9-volt battery. Hurrah for them. That was what? End of the 18th century, so 1780, 1790. Then the telegraph. We all know how popular that became. And in the 1790s, Humboldt threw himself into research. He wanted to identify this, electrical fluid, because every time they would do electrical testing, your mucus, your noses, your ears, your eyes would run, and so they thought there had to be an electrical fluid force or something that traveled through you. And he was the first guy to actually use dogs in experimentation and talk about their angry responses. Well, I can't imagine why if you'd shock something, it would give you an angry response. Big news. Big news. Yeah, there's been a whole lot of that. I actually have used Rife machines and had great success. I'm not going to tell you that you need to use them. You need to learn about them and talk to your doctor and stuff like that. But I have used the big potent Rife machines with a lot of success in my disorder. And I am one of a group of 3 that was diagnosed at the same time. We all became friends. I'm the only one left standing. The other 2 were wheelchair bound or bed bound very quickly and then left. They're with the Lord. So, and I'm kind of plateauing and kind of holding right now. I still have issues and I still have weird issues, but I'm doing like all the doctors have the same question. How are you beating this? Of course, I tell them pure spot, but a lot of it is not trusting physicians. A lot of it is just my wariness. Yeah, see, we're getting some good stuff in the comments. So sometimes I can't read the comments because YouTube won't like it. Sometimes I can twang and they can't understand me, so I can get away with it. But always read these comments, and when they load and you can watch it as a replay with the comments again, go back and read them again, because people drop some knowledge in our comment section. And I think Sabrina actually, I've only watched half of her video, but she did like a video on my video I did at the farm the other day. But I apologize. The satellite was horrible. It's normally great down there. You know how well my live streams and stuff go from down there. It was horrible yesterday. Horrible. So I'm up here to have a better signal. And I was like, that's so strange. But it's not. It's not. So they named the battery like a 9-volt battery because the Italian guy that did it, he was like Volte or something, like a Volte, something. That was his name. So he invents the battery, and in his experimentation, he gets a sound from some of his experiments. And he was the first one to use water as an electrolyte. And instead of using like a pair of metal poles or pins, he used 30 pairs, which was the equivalent to a 20-volt battery. He said he heard a crackling sound in his ear, and he did not repeat that experimentation ever. I probably wouldn't have either. I've been like, no thank you, I don't know what I heard, and no thank you. He was actually afraid it would harm. He felt so confused afterwards. He was afraid it would harm him and he would not be able to care for his patients, so he did not try that again. Oh snap. If you see, that's a good question. I do know why they use linen in hospitals, because linen is highly antibacterial, antimicrobial, and all that crap. That's all I know, though. So then here comes this German doctor, Rudolf Brenner. And he was roughly 70 years later after the first guy heard the crackling in his ears. And he actually demonstrated the effects on the auditory nerve. And the book's going to get to that later, so just bookmark that in your head. They also began to understand how it affected the heart. So then we merge into the part of the chapter called Speeding Up and Slowing Down the Heart. Humboldt was the first man to see the effects of electricity on a heart via a nerve fiber. If you don't like my husband, you're going to hate him. He actually used a fox and found a way to put the nerve endings on his metal. They called them poles, and activate the heart with electrical impulse. He used a fox. And then he experimented on frogs, lizards, and toads. And he realized that the average dissected heart would beat about 21 times a minute. And when exposed to the galvanized metal, it would speed up like 38 to 42. And then he went on and thought, we've got to learn more about this metal. And so instead of just using certain types of metal, they started using iron, steel, zinc, and all this other stuff. He was the first guy to find out that electricity could restart a heart. So he realized that if a heart stopped for 5 minutes, when exposed to the electrical impulse, it would restart immediately and contract immediately as soon as the metals touched it. He went on to stimulate the heart of a carp and kept it successfully alive for like 15 minutes. Then he found a dying linnet, which is like a small finch, a bird. And it was basically what he thought was dead or very near death. He electrocuted the entire body from beak to butt. I guess in and out is what they thought. I don't know. Ooh, In-N-Out burgers. Okay, don't parallel that. it didn't work in my head. Ooh. Anyway, he did a full body electrocution of the linnet, which is a little bird. And it actually got up and lived for like 8 more minutes before he said it very calmly died, like he had given it energy and that had seeped back out. So with this, a lot of physicians then jumped on the bandwagon, and they wanted to see how the human heart would react to electricity. And they learned that negative electricity had the opposite effect. So you could speed it up or slow it down with positive or electrical energy impulses. And so they learned that they could manipulate the speed of the heart, but they also realized that all individuals reacted differently. The only thing that was consistent was that positive sped it up, negative slowed it down. So then they went to the part of the chapter they called estupidimento, which basically is confusion or you're an idiot, you know. So here they've learned a lot about, positive and negative electrical effect, like I said. They learned that it made you salivate, that it made earwax produce, that it made your pulse change, that it increased nasal mucus, it increased gastric fluids and juices, it stimulated appetite, and it increased bowel movement sometimes. But I thought it was very funny that a lot of these look like allergy problems we have in America today. And a lot of people have a working theory that I kind of agree with, that we're all antennas that are used to bounce these signals daily. And a lot of people are on allergy shots and stuff and allergy medication that used to never be used. I know I have a lot more problems with my drainage in my mastoid and my sinus system than I ever had as a child. I never had allergy. I hauled hay my entire childhood, never sneezed once. Lived in horse barns, never sneezed once. Now, I feel like I've got allergies all year long, and I have drainage issues so bad that I get mastoiditis. So I just thought that was weird. It kind of looked like allergies or autoimmune issues, and remember that. But then it says stimulated appetite. You notice how America is always the fattest country? And listen, I'm a heifer too, but America's always the fattest country. Always the fattest country. Is it because maybe we're the most progressed in the use of electricity in ways that maybe society doesn't understand? I don't know. I'm curious. That's what it made me think about. So I was interested in this part. So electrotherapy stayed in use until the early 20th century. You know, and then they found out it had other effects that were kind of unwanted at this time, like headaches, fatigue. Listen, headaches, fatigue, brain haze, stupidimento, confusion, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, coughing, wheezing like asthma, repeated electrification caused constipation, and it also caused drowsiness but insomnia at the same time. Well, it sounds like every autoimmune issue that I have an autoimmune issue. It sounds just like every autoimmune issue. And I had in a previous live stream talked about cattle and how cattle were now also presenting with these autoimmune issues that I thought may have been because of overly progressive genetic modification in the breeding programs and otherwise. But now that I'm seeing this, maybe it's just that they've increased the electrical capacity and usage and signals in our nation, that it's now getting farther out into more rural areas and perhaps hitting the cattle and the other livestock, and they're starting to have this having. I don't know. Makes me curious. I know that Dad and his cattle farm, they have less issues than most people, but y'all know how deep down the holler they are. And a lot of people that have more prominent farms that are not as far away from major hub cities, they seem to have more health issues, more vet calls. I noticed that when I worked for a lot of farms. It was weird. It's like the ones that were in the boonies had pretty healthy horses, but if I worked at one that was a prime location near an airport where they chartered horses in and out, we seemed like we had issues all the time. The vet was there every other day, and the mares needed more help during foaling. Anyway, those are just, that's what it made me think of when I read this part of the book. They also noticed that electricity helped increase blood flow to joints, and it forced wounds and blisters and other stuff to drain so they would heal faster. So the only thing that they really noticed that was a true super negative was that electrified blood took longer to clot. So, you know, there's a lot of people that have clotting disorders today, like way more prominent than it ever has been noted in any historical context. Makes you wonder. I have no idea if that's, it just, all these things kind of drew a parallel in my brain. Well, I know hay fever is more about tree pollen and stuff, but the fact that more people are sensitive could be because our bodies are getting pummeled with electrical fields, which makes those senses amplify. Because it produces mucus, produces wax, it makes an overproduction. And then if you have an overproduction of those mucus glands, obviously they're going to grab more of what's in the atmosphere. So is a possible high pummeling of electrical current causing us to be more susceptible to these allergens? It's just, you just wonder. You wonder. Oh yeah, they've got that big satellite there, don't they? Samsonite. I see a suitcase in my head every time I say your name. Sorry. So then here came this called, I don't know, it's ABB''E. I have no idea, but his name was Nollet. I'm suspecting Nollet. He proved that perspiration could be created just being an electric field, an electromagnetic field. You didn't have to be plugged up to an alternating or direct current. You could just be in the field, and it would create perspiration and some other issues. So they then went through a time in history where they electrocuted everything from houseflies to humans, and everything was in this list. But Nollet was the first in 1753 to report significant biological effects from exposure to the direct current field. And that was very, very, very important. So now it says, look at the table on page 28. I left myself notes. See, I'm just so good. So here's the table on page 28. I'm going to read it to you. And it says, effects of electricity as reported in the 18th century. Okay, and the left column is therapeutic and neutral effects, and the right column is non-therapeutic effects. In the therapeutic and neutral effects are changes in pulse, sensation of taste, light, and sound, increased body temperature, pain relief, restoration of muscle tone, stimulation of appetite. I'm just going to tell everybody I'm a highly electrical being. That's why I'm fat. I'm rolling with that from now on. Feel free to use it. Mental exhilaration, which is probably why they were giving shocking kisses back in the 1750s. Sedation, perspiration, salivation, secretion of earwax, secretion of mucus, menstruation or uterine contractions, lactation, lacrimation, urination, defecation. Basically, if it goes in or out, electricity is going to affect it. And those were the therapeutic or neutral effects. Now, here are the non-therapeutic effects. Dizziness, nausea, headaches, nervousness, irritability. Now, as I read this off, listen, you hear all those drug side effects and stuff. Maybe they just give us drugs to make us think we're having side effects because of the drugs. Maybe it's not the drugs at all. Maybe it's just the electric field we're in all the time because of all these towers and everything else that's going on. So listen to the non-therapeutic effects as I read them. Dizziness, nausea, headaches, nervousness, irritability, mental confusion, depression, insomnia, drowsiness, fatigue, weakness, numbness and tingling, muscle and joint pain, muscle spasms and cramps, backache, heart palpitations, chest pains, colic, diarrhea, constipation, nosebleeds, hemorrhage, itching, tremors, seizures, paralysis, fever, respiratory infection, shortness of breath, coughing, wheezing, and asthma attacks, eye pain, weakness and fatigue, ringing in ears, and a metallic taste. That's curious. That's really, yeah. Let me give you an effervescent kiss. Woo! But that's really interesting. And so I thought one interesting thing with the body's digestive system was that if you electrified a little bit, it increased bowel movements. If you electrified a lot and on the DC current, like the AC and a little bit increased bowel movements, DC and a lot caused constipation. So that shows that the body has a receptive, welcoming mat to electricity and then sorry, that's too much. So there's got to be a parameter within everybody's body, which is probably individual to them, where electricity is probably a positive thing until a certain extent, and it may be different for us all. But that was chapter 2. That was a lot of information in chapter 2, and we just kind of hit the high notes. But it makes a lot of sense. Is perhaps a lot of the stuff we're dealing with as health problems in a lot of these first world countries, perhaps due to a lot of the what we call bonuses in life that create a lot of electronic or magnetic fields that we have to live in, and some that we probably don't even know that are being projected in and around us. Are we having side effects from that? Because it seems like the side effects in autoimmune disorders and a lot of the prevalent issues in societies that are first world today tend to look a lot like the side effects of electrotherapy kind of gone overboard. I don't know. I don't know. I'm learning in this book as you all are learning, and of course we all know, most of us here, we also watch Sabrina. And if you don't know who Sabrina Wallace is, she is my best friend, but she's also the smartest person I've ever met in the whole freaking world. And she is on the Odyssey platform as Synergy, P-S-I-N-E-R-G-Y, and you can get her on Ko-Fi as Synergy as well. A lot of people take her stuff and spread it. I did an interview with her a year or two ago, and it's spreading like wildfire. I go on TikTok and see myself all the time, and I'm like, whoa. My dad's even finding me on random social media, and he'll like screenshot it and send it to me. I'm like, I know. Which I don't mind them sharing it. Everybody needs to know this. It's just weird to see yourself on the internet. I kind of get how Sabrina is deer in the headlights sometimes. But we have a little bit extra knowledge when it comes to all of this because we listen to her and she's just so super aware. Hi, simple girl. But when you start taking apart and going down to the building blocks of perhaps what they saw, and what I'm looking for is a chasm, and we're starting to find it, I think. When the electrical stuff started to lull in popularity, when it was socially induced, it seemed to come back because society kind of goes in waves. We're attention deficit most of the time anyway. Society goes in waves about different topics and different things. But the research and scientific field, normally when it latches onto something, it just keeps growing. So we've seen lulls in the social stuff. Now we're getting to where a lot of these guys are finding really important things. I'm expecting here soon it's going to tell us about either transition of electricity, how the research field and medical field kind of threw it down and other agencies took it back up, such as power companies and phones and communication devices and So I'm looking for that big break where it looks like the medical field just dropped it and something else picked it up, because that's going to, for me, be a deflection. It's going to be that smoke and mirrors that look over here, not here. That's what I'm looking for, because that's going to look like a deflection path that they would have done to give society what they thought they wanted, which was new knowledge about this life source, without giving them the knowledge that maybe they were getting in another way. Because we know that, even if you go digging on, in the old peer-reviewed journals, we know that some research and experimentation continue because you can find it. But a lot of it is not logged, written about, or discussed. So I'm digging in a lot of online libraries and my alumni library at schools and stuff, and trying to challenge my thoughts on that. I get you. Yeah. I understand the targeted perspective more than you would even know. But this is very interesting to me. This is super interesting to me, especially since when I was in my prime and I was such an Amazon when I was young, I was really a power lifter. I hauled rope show cattle. I shod horses with my father, who was a blacksmith. I routinely broke bulls that were 600 to 1,000 pounds to lead and show and be docile on a little string. I trained horses, and I was stout. I was benching 150 around when I was like 14. I was leg pressing around 690 when I was 14, 15. I had to lift weights with the football team and have documentation and permission to do so because none of the women weightlifting teams could spot me. It was useless. when they had the powder puff game at my high school, I was told I was not going to be able to play because I would hurt someone. And I went to work at this wilderness boot camp and was, I've hog hunted my whole life. I've worked in taxidermy shops, meat processing. I've done everything. I worked on farms, worked in tobacco. And so working at this boot camp was fun because we'd go canoeing, we'd go hiking. And unless the kids were having a really bad behavior day, it was just like going on a trip with your family. It was not a big deal. And now when they had issues, they were big issues. That's how I ended up half crippled. But I was really good at that. And I got injured, which didn't seem like an initial impact. I recuperated, did a lot of physical therapy, took about a year off to do an AmeriCorps contract and tutor in my very, 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 very illiterate area. And then I went right back into my emotional fields that I worked in, and I went back to supervising offenders for the state. So I went from juvenile to adults, and I did the violent offenders for the state and the interstate compact cases. Had some duality with federal stuff too, but that was not fun. I don't like federal. I did not have a good taste for federal officers. Didn't like them. And it seemed like as soon as I began shining in a counseling component and having a high success rate in supervision of violent offenders, the pro board left me, but the state hated me because the state needed at least like 37% to reoffend to keep the prisons making money, because prisons are now a private money-making thing. So while the parole board left me because they were seeing more success stories, and less recidivism, the state hated me because they had just privatized the entire prison system almost, and they were not making any money off of me. So it was really a catch-22 because you're getting praised by one and irritated by the other, but you worked for both. And I was just like, I'm just trying to do right by these people. That's when I started experiencing a lot of health issues. A lot. It became so predominant in my world that I had like 4 leg surgeries in 8 or 9 years, and lost 3 other organs along the way. Became very sick. And then it said they took him 6.5 or 7 years to understand that I had a very rare neuromuscular disorder that basically was created by a diseased nervous system. It pronounced much like MS, but it was like one of the most rare but most painful disorders known to man. And they kept telling me I was not going to be here long. You're not going to be here long. You need to prepare. And it's just like they wanted me to give up. Well, if you know anything about me, if you tell me to do something, I'm probably going to do the exact opposite of what you tell me. I identify with mules. What can I say? So that's when I began noticing that I started to improve, is when I started doing the exact opposite of what the doctors wanted me to do. Which, here's one thing that really piques my interest. One thing they wanted to do once or twice a year was to send me down to an office in a very metro urban area. And they wanted to put about 100 to 200 little pins in me and then electrocute me to tell me how well my nerves were functioning. We stopped that. Because I can tell you how well my nerves are functioning. I live with them. I feel them. You don't have to fricassee me to see how well my nerves are functioning. You can see the skin change, the color change, the skin quality change. You can see bruising where I can't feel and I bump into stuff all the time because my spatial awareness is reduced because I don't feel my limbs. And I got an idea that this electrocution time was not beneficial to me at all, but rather beneficial to them, because a lot of my treatment through my insurance hinged upon it, which made me go, well, we ain't ever going to do that again. I had no desire to be wired up and fricassee like a Kentucky Fried Chicken, if it's even chicken. I have my doubts. Anyway, so I stopped that. Do you know that I began improving? I began improving. They were mad, and they told me several times that they then didn't have we don't have the information we need without that test to treat you. None of my treatment was based upon that test. They couldn't show me one link. So I said adios to that neurology group, and I began a more symptomatic treatment of my issue with more natural tinctures and stuff. If you know about me, my dad's Irish. My mom is a little bit of everything, but she's got a very strong line of Lenape Cherokee from the Delaware tribe in her. And so my great grandma was really smart about this stuff. And my granny was very smart about this stuff. And I learned a lot from hanging around my granny. My granny was very smart. My grandma was smart too, but my granny was super smart. My dad's dad, who was basically German and Irish, he was very smart as well. And I guess I was lucky to just have really good grandparents that had, a really wide wealth of knowledge with them. So I just went back to more normal things. Now, and my husband had dug roots for most of his childhood to sell to herb places. So we had a lot of knowledge as younger people in Appalachia. And I just started going back to the old ways. And at that point, I trusted myself more than physicians. I saw improvement. When I removed myself from Big Pharma, I saw a huge improvement. When I removed myself from my insurance company dictating my care, I saw huge improvements. The strange thing is a lot of insurance companies don't want you if you don't do whatever they tell you to do. Even though no one at my insurance company that tried to dictate my care was a medical professional, they thought they could tell my doctor what to have me do or take or what studies to have, and we kiboshed that really quick. So while I'm still very sick, I'm not as sick as I was. I was bedbound for about 7 years. I was not able to go or do anything at all. It was a misery. I was in misery. I was in absolute misery. To the point where I didn't think I would see my kids get far beyond high school. And then I just thought, well, we're just going to change stuff because I'm not happy about this. So we started changing things, and I started doing better. The big thing when I started doing better was when I pulled away from a lot of the doctors and the testing they were doing. I noticed that my nerves that were causing me the issues, they either stopped or they died. And I was okay with that because at least they weren't hurting me. So I do have mobility issues and a lot of sensory issues, but I'm much better than I was. But my treatment having no answers, even though they make a butt ton of money off me, prompted me to really pay attention. And I have limited the people around me that I trust in my medical bubble. And it may not be right for everybody, but it was absolutely right for me. Margaret, I can imagine. You know that tonsils, they all the time telling their mothers, don't keep their kids' hands out of their mouth, wash their hands, put sanitizer on their hands. Do you know that kids build their immune systems by touching their environment and putting it in their mouth and through their tonsils? That's how a child builds their immune system. Literally, it's probably good for them to eat dirt. I'm not saying that, but honestly, the concept of what goes in gets processed and their body learns to handle it. It makes you think that, okay, the more you navigate your environment, the better off you're going to be in it as you age. I mean, it's just kind of one of those duh things that make sense, right? A lot of doctors will back that up with research too. But it's kind of one of those split areas where people don't want to agree. So I found this in a lot of stuff with my disorder, and I just had to do what was right for me. I would talk to all the doctors, take in all the knowledge, sift through it, see what stuck and what felt reliable and what had stuff to validate it or verify it. And then I would make my gut reaction feeling on it. And honestly, how did I make most of my decisions about my health? I prayed about it. And if I didn't have a good feeling, we didn't do it. So I have improved a lot. I still have basically a terminal disorder. It's like the slowest roller coaster ride ever for me. But, hey, and it's affecting my organs, but at a much slower rate than it was. And it seems like the slowdown came when I retracted from a lot of the current medical treatments that they were pushing upon me that didn't make a lot of sense to me, and the doctors couldn't make it make sense. Oh yeah, well, you see me pick strawberries and right down the gullet they go, insects, dirt, and all. When we pick blackberries in the summer, we used to pick like 60+ gallon every summer. I ate a lot of them. I would come out stained, just hands, mouth, face, clothes, and when I'd pick them with David when we first got married, we'd go out and pick blackberries because I made a lot of jelly and we would sell a lot of them. And we enjoyed picking blackberries. There wasn't as many bear around here then as there are now, but we really enjoyed picking blackberries. And he would be like, I'd have more stuff if you'd stop eating them. They were good. They were real good. So, I had, and I grew up where when I fed the horses in the barns, I'd take corn out of the sweet feed and chew on it. I grew up in livestock barns, and so I had a healthy dose of probably a lot of environments to build my immune system. And I was so healthy until I got into state and federal level jobs. And then and I did good as long as it seemed like my practices and my job aligned with what they desired. And as soon as they didn't, it seemed like I started having problems. And to be quite honest, I'll just tell you what my last boss told me at the TDOC. I had tried to work out a plan that I wanted to at least have 18 more months of work and then phase out, because I had a lot of people that I had for like 6-7 years on a caseload, and I didn't want to leave them in the last year of their supervision when they were doing well. And I thought, if I don't stay with them, they're not going to get off paper. They will have a hiccup, and let's, continuity's sake, let's just try to get another 18 months out of you, Liz. And that's what I was trying to do. And when I submitted that, he basically pushed me into a room and said, well, listen, you can either have a disorder or a paycheck. Now, if you can simplify something to that extent to me, then I probably am not going to like you as a person. Which I didn't care for him much anyway. But that was when I had the first inkling of an idea that maybe these two things were related. And that, oddly enough, came shortly after I denied signing a clemency application, because the man was not appropriate for a clemency. And I had denied that twice to the governor and once to my management, and told them that I would not sign that. It would be illegal, it would be fraudulent, and that they would have to find another officer that would do that, because I would not do that, because he was a murderer that had been on a suspended sentence, but he was still committing issues. He had just had a domestic issue, and I had wrote a warrant, and they kiboshed my warrant. I submitted another one. And then their response was to come back and tell me that they wanted a clemency application, which should have been done by the offender and then presented to me to see if I would approve. I wouldn't have. They just wanted me to sign it and send it in blank. They would fill it out. No. And so that's when I started having a lot of issues. I was well locked when all my co-employees and co-officers. I worked in like 5 counties. I taught. I trained. I was licensed in various other teachings that they had to do throughout the year with offenders. I was a very important officer because I did every level of that job and could do all of it. Matter of fact, I supervised over 430 something, almost 450 offenders for like a half a year, because somebody had retired, even though they had like 9 years knowledge. They didn't hire somebody in time, and I had to assume multiple caseloads on top of my multiple county rotation, and I had over 400 offenders for like 6 months. The average you're supposed to have 60 to 120. Like right around 100 is really the max they want to put on an officer, but officers routinely have around 190. But I was efficiently supervising over 400 and teaching classes and doing multiple counties. So why would you not want me there? I was an asset. I looked at it as more of a control issue. I believe that Samsonite. We just recently saw an elderly man in our area doing well, have a stroke, bounce back from the stroke. But the kids couldn't find a way to bring him home to care for him, so he had to go into a little like mid-range care placement. Just immediate downfall. And that's where Mom and Dad was at the funeral yesterday. It's sad. It's sad. And Mom and Dad would go visit him and come back and say that it didn't seem like the hospital wanted him to do well. And I said, no. I said they want to test him for everything, bill for everything they can. You know, and why would a society that makes the living pay for the dead want to keep anyone alive? I mean, you can keep the bill going with the dead, you know, so just add more onto the bill. Add more, you know, the living are so numerous, just keep adding to the bill. And that's my perspective on that. But, you know, and when my granny had to have nursing home treatment, the nursing home treatment was so inept to the point where they just were not giving her water so her bowels could move. Her body didn't have enough water. And as soon as we got her out of there, we had to fight during COVID to get her out of there. I was mad. I went directly to the state and said, I'm fixing to sue you. And I presented them with photos. And I could have had probably 7 charges on them. And I said, if you don't open the doors and let us have her, I'm going to go to the news. And my mom got a phone call and they were like, come get her. I'll play dirty if I need to. I will. You know, if you're not going to meet me in an appropriate manner, I'll dip it low for a little while. Don't worry. I'll come meet you. But we got her home, and as soon as Mom got her, basically her body balanced and fluid retention balanced, she was fine. Came off almost every medication. It's routinely said in nursing homes, oh, just send them to China. You'll hear nurses in the hallway, well, just send them to China. Do you know what that means? Load them up with pharmaceuticals that primarily come from China that turn them into a zombie so that they're less of a hostile patient to deal with. They're less trouble. So if you ever walk through your nursing home and you hear a nurse say send them to China, bring it to somebody's attention. I'm a workhorse. I'm just mean. Watch out. I mean, nursing homes, you can find some good ones. We when Mom had to have her knee surgery, we found an awesome one, but it took a lot of looking and a lot of questions and it just took a lot. A lot of them, sadly, and when they locked the doors and wouldn't let family in, and they told us, you can video call or tablet call at any time. Well, no, we can't. She's not capable. Well, just, the nurses will hold the tablet or the phone for you. Mom kept trying to line that up, and the phone's not working. The tablet's in use. The tablet's being repaired. And I just called and I said, listen, we've not seen proof of life in like 3 weeks. And if you don't show me my grandma in about 10 minutes, I'm fixing to come up and we're going to have a problem because I'm going to call APS. And we're going to go in there and do an adult well check because I got ideas that she ain't well. And all of a sudden the nurse said, I've got the app on my phone. I'll call you. She was not bathed, showered, maintained. Her hands and fingernails were filthy. I threw a fit. And I was like, I want her cleaned up and I want to see her clean in 10 minutes. And I was like, this is sorriness, this is laziness, and the fact that nobody can police you, I said, it's making y'all brazen and bold. And I said, absolutely not. They said, well, you can come to her window. I said, she can't get out of the bed. She's over by the door, and the window's so goddamn dirty, and we can only clean one side of it. And, I had a deep-seated mistrust of everybody before that, but it certainly didn't help. Certainly didn't help. So we got Granny home, and miraculously, she was fine. She was still dementia-ridden and in an Alzheimer's state, but her body maintained itself. She got off almost every medication, and she lasted for several years. Mom still, had to provide her care, But as long as she got food and drink and changed properly, just maintained, she was fine. It was just a care issue. It was just a heart issue. And, you know, several times when I was dealing with this nursing home fiasco, I would say, listen, if you don't have the heart to work here, do not. This job is important. You don't do it for money. If you don't have the heart to do it, don't do it at all. And the social worker that was at that nursing home was replaced. She said, you can't talk to me like this. I said, honey, I ain't even got out of first gear. And she snapped me, and then I did some stuff that resulted in her having a review and audit, and she hadn't done any case notes, liaison with any insurances. She was basically sitting back and letting the insurance fly solo and do everything and dictate everything, and she was not even trying to petition for the families or interact with the patients. So, I mean, how was I supposed to behave? And they were like, well, your grandma's no longer here. You don't have to worry. It makes me worry about everybody else's loved one that's in there. I'm not just fixated on people I'm related to. I'm fixated on all of society. We all deserve to be treated appropriately, especially if we require care that's being paid for and you're getting paycheck to do it. Just do it. But, you know, I'm a butthole, I know. I'm nice until you give me a reason not to be. And then I hit done at like Mach 90. And you meet a whole different side of me. And it's not a nice one. But most of the time I'm nice until I'm shown that is not working. And if that does not compute in your brain, I will discuss things with you in a different manner. You may not enjoy that different manner, but it will ring your bell. So that's how I've had to become a lot more forward in my life to deal with my careers, deal with my health. Thunder, it's gonna come a gully whoosher. My beans need water, that's okay. But I had to become much more forward in my life. And honestly, there was about a 3-year gap there with this disorder when it first hit that I was very docile. And I was just trying to take it all in because they kept telling me, oh God, you're not going to make it. You know, you're not going to be here long. And so I just kind of retreated internally, trying to kind of prepare a lot of things for my family, for my kids, for my husband, just trying to prepare me and prepare a lot of things for them and just resolve this issue that I'd ran smack into. And then I realized that you tell me all these bad things, but sure ain't helping me, and you sure ain't telling me anything good to do, and you act really confused when I ask you point blank questions. And I just thought it triggered that other side of me that sat back like a mule and said, well, go on with your bad stuff. I'm going this way. You know, if you follow me, we're going to have problems. And so I did my own thing, you know, and I trusted certain physicians, and I kept those physicians, and I distrusted others, and I got rid of them. And I kind of curated my own treatment symptomatically instead of trying to do this weird format they had, and it was much more successful, and I've done much better. But you have to almost be a horrible person sometimes to get the respect you deserve in a medical field. And that's sad, especially in a land where they get paid so much to do so little. What, Tylenol's like $150 in the hospital? Jeez Louise. And I just sit there going, but if I pay you $150 to give me a Tylenol, what does somebody in the nursing home pay you when you have to wipe somebody's butt? You know, what are these outlandish fees that coincide, you know, but normally they do it in a pharmaceutical manner because they don't care to, you know, treat the workers like crap too. So you learn a lot. And of course I worked in the field, so I was privy to a lot of information they probably weren't. And I zinged them with that too. But it was just a very unsettling time in my life. And now that I've like taken back over control, and I tell people if they get to be in my care team or not, and if I don't like them, I tell them where to go and how to get there and the turns to take. And I'm doing much better. Yes, it is. And almost literally at times too. You remember when they used to put stuff in it, and yeah. Had someone tell me the other day, you shouldn't drink raw cow's milk, it'd kill you. I said, really? I said, because they put too much formaldehyde in the dairy in the Northeast cities one time, and a whole bunch of young children died, but I've never heard of a mass issue with an Amish family or community. And they just look at me. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, they put too much formaldehyde in the milk. Formaldehyde? Yeah, during the pasteurization process. And it killed a whole bunch of kids. You don't remember that? No. Oh. You know, and then you can open them up to all this stuff that they don't, you know, they just don't go looking for. But, you know, people put a lot of trust in stuff that they don't understand or they have no knowledge about. And I'm one of those people that if it works, I want to know all about it. If it doesn't work, I want to know all about it. Because I'm probably going to land somewhere in the middle. So, and I figured that my geographical location of my hind end is my business. And wherever I fall in that geographical location on any decision I make is my business. But it's also my business to make sure I'm educating myself. So, yeah, you just have to do a lot of research, you have to talk to a lot of physicians, you have to make sure you're making the right decision for you, the right decision for your family, and you have to make sure that you have trust in whatever decision you do make. That's probably one of the biggest things if you have a medical issue. So as I'm reading this book, I'm going, really? Wow. You know, and because of a lot of my own issues I've had, to where it seems like doctors have told me the opposite of what they found in the 1700s to be true. I don't appreciate that. It irritates me a little bit, just a little bit. And so as we get on in this book, I'm probably going to have, oh my God, and aha moments. They're going to freak me out. So y'all will get a real reveal of how this book impacts me and my understanding of my health, because I have complex regional pain syndrome. It was when I was diagnosed, it was called reflex sympathetic dystrophy. And then they changed it because when they did the coding, that was already taken up by a respiratory, the letters were already taken up by a respiratory disorder. And I don't think CRPS describes what I have. It is more of a dystrophy. It is more like MS. So I always just go with the old school terminology. But the thing I found about that is that even though it's like the most horrible diagnosis in the world and very, very rare, but like one of the worst you can have, most doctors have never heard of it and are not trained of it. So if I have an issue where I have to go seek treatment at like an emergency clinic or something, I end up having to educate the doctors and nurses handling me so that they can treat me, but then I get billed for educating them. And it affects my organs with electrical impulses in the nerves. That's why this book is just amazing to me. And for many years, it was affecting my pancreas. It just will center on an organ and try to obliterate it. And the organs, they film and test just fine, but they'll just stop working because of this disorder. And so if your pancreas stops working, it'll kill you. So I had multiple years where I was in the hospital just every few weeks because my pancreas just go, peace, I'm done, you know. And they would load me up with certain medicines and it would start again. And I would get better and I would go home and then it would repeat. And I had to take that Creon, which is whoa expensive. Holy crap, is that expensive. And I got better. And then when I made all my changes, my pancreas just was miraculously done. It's like, I'm good now. We're good. It's never given me another problem, oddly enough. So I think it's probably a medical management pharmaceutical issue or something. But I was there one time at the ER and I knew they were going to probably admit me because I was throwing up what looked like hair mousse at the time. So I knew it was my pancreas again. And thunder. And the doctor came in and he said, well, how much do you drink? Sir, I had 2 kids by the time I was 21. I didn't have time to go through that phase in life. I might have 2 glasses of wine in a year, and that's at holiday dinners, and that's if I finish them. And he kind of rolled his eyes. And I said, that was not nice. I'm telling you the truth. And he said, well, I get told that a lot. And I said, fine. And he said, well, let's pull a an ETOH. I said, you can pull an ethyl, blah, blah, blah. And he just looked at me. I said, yeah, I'm a retired parole officer. I know what that is. I said, go right ahead. I said, you ain't going to find crap in my system. He goes, well, we'll see, and I'll be back. And I thought, oh, you little turd. And I was mad. Made me mad. And just so happened the nurse that came in, she goes, Elizabeth. She was a nurse that used to work at Brushy Mountain. Brushy Mountain had closed down in my last few years of supervising, and she had to relocate to an ER. She went to that doctor, and she goes, no, I know her. She trained like all the ILPs and, you know, all the CEOs and stuff. They've worked with her and been trained by her. She's a really good person. And he was like, no, she's drinking. He came back in the room, and he had to say he was sorry because there was no alcohol in my system. He said, I'm sorry, I just, I don't normally see someone with this advanced of a pancreatic issue that doesn't drink. And I said, well, I don't normally come to hospitals and meet ignorant people that have gone to school for 12 years, just play like stupid either. Guess we're both breaking new ground today. And he looked at me and he goes, I deserve that. I was admitted. I was in there for like 8 days. By the time I was in there for 3 days, it was so bad that I had skin lesions all over my face and torso. They told me twice that I needed to prepare my family during that time, that stay in the hospital. And there was at one point around the 5th day that you feel like you're like mentally packing your bags to go somewhere you're supposed to go. And it's not scary. It's what it feels like. And then my body began to turn, and the numbers started coming back better. And by the 8th day, I was able to go home, mostly because I was dying to go home, and the doctor was amazed. I think belligerence is probably what's kept me here this long, to be quite honest. Honestly, I think it is. So if I had probably given up every time they told me, I need to prepare, I would have probably left this world 8 times by now. So, a lot of it probably is just pure momentum and force of self. But I don't have very many nice things to say about the medical practice that I've run into. It doesn't help that I'm allergic and have one of those paradoxical reactions to almost all medications, which may be my saving grace. I don't know. Because they can't give me a lot of different medications to test, like when they're researching and testing on this disorder. So I was never in a test group, so I never took any experimental test stuff. So that may be one reason I'm doing well too. For 8 days, they were trying to put me on a protocol, which is like a dialysis for your pancreas. That's the best way I can describe it. And basically trying to flush my system. What scared them the most was that the ammonia levels in my body had gotten dangerously high. So they really thought I was shutting down. And that's probably what prompted the lesions that I had. I don't know what they call the protocol. It was just explained to me like dialysis for my pancreas. And I was not probably coherent enough the first few days. So, but a lot of injections in my stomach, a lot of medications, a lot of fluids, a lot of machines beside my bed. That's all I remember from that. And I had to follow up after that, and they just knew that my pancreas was going to have like mad damage after that. They were like, something's got to be wrong. They did, and what is it? ERMCP or EMCP or my fingers in my brain. It's a nuclear med testing where they basically focus on your torso and can basically image the pancreas perfectly. It was pristine. It looked great. He goes, I don't understand. I said, buddy, you and me both. It would just stop. It was like the electrical impulses would stop it, and then it would start working again. So I was either getting an impulse to stop or an impulse to start, and we don't know what was creating those. And living in what I've lived through the last several years, I have an idea now with the way other things affect me. And I know that I am super sensitive because of my ear structure to hypersonic, subsonic sounds, electricity, the sounds the electricity emits because of my ear structure and the extra bone and bone marrow I have in my ears. My ear, nose, and throat doctor thought I was crazy. He was like, "You're a unicorn." And I was like, "It's not good being a unicorn." But I have a lot wrong with me. But because I have a lot different. Because I have a lot different, I don't respond like other people, and I get a different view of things. So it's kind of enlightening at times. So it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. So I am a weird case study. So probably not one that you need to bank any, of your medical stuff on, because I'm just a very weird case study. But it's very interesting for people to learn what I've been through with this and to see where I am now when I should probably be going with the Lord. I'm hoping that it leads to a lot more stuff. Like, it's already raised my eyebrows several times, and I'm very interested in this book. And I felt a pull to purchase it as soon as I read the title. You ever just feel that, yeah, that's, you get it. And there were like 7 other books in the list that this person had put up on this post. And I don't even remember where I read it at now. I just know that I wrote down the 7 titles, and this one hit me. And I was like, I've got to read this book. I've got to. And it wasn't like the most scientific title, The Invisible Rainbow. It just hit me. And it was published in 2017. So this is research that has been done and kept kind of quiet for a long time. And this Arthur Furstenberg was like, well, we're just going to put it in a book so everybody can have it. So thanks to him. So I would have been in my medical journey anyway by the time this was published. So it probably couldn't have saved me anything, but it may potentially teach me a lot. So I'm interested. This book is very interesting. I will create a playlist of all these videos. Sabrina may continue to watch my lives and pull out certain things that I say and talk about them. She's doing mad research and is mad in her research mode. So what we're doing independently, but we do watch each other's stuff and keep tabs on each other. And if we hit something super phenomenal, we'll get in touch with each other and go, whoa, look what I found, But she is in a very preoccupied place right now. And so just to have her watch the lives is like, wow, thank you, And I know she knows that I'm trying to give the easiest learning to what you then advance toward with her knowledge, so that we have a better grasp of what she's speaking of, so we don't have to play such a catch-up game. And I think that this book is also probably going to give us a lot of those questions about a lot of the stuff she talks about, a lot of her, like, what is it, SOSA, MOSA, and all her acronyms and stuff. So you're going to be able to understand the words, because we're going to have kind of like, where did they come from? How was it formed? Where did the technology be, where was it created and researched? A lot of that's probably going to be in this book. And y'all, I'm just barely into it. This is what we have covered together. I'm not very much past that because of how much you have to reread and go back and pull out and make notes. But this is going to be very interesting. And I do want to purchase another one that is The Obscured Principles by something other Kane, Caine. And even on eBay, it's like $70-something for a paperback. The book itself is mondo expensive in my world. I'm poor. But I want to purchase it as well and do a deep dive on it. I can't just on a whim purchase something like that. So if you want me to purchase that book, go to the Etsy store, Hillbilly Heart Decor, buy something from Dave's Etsy store so I can say, hey, they want me to buy that book. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be like, oh, you sold that? I can buy the book now, right? That's what I'm going to do. But I want to buy that book, The Obscured Principles, because it's supposed to be like a jaw dropper. Everybody that has written about it, that's read it, has been like, I understand so much more now. And I'm like, well, doggone it. I want it. But it is very expensive. Like, it is highly sought after. So it's pretty expensive. It's thundering. It's going to storm here, or it's going to skin us and go right by. Okay, I have 2 of the possums done. I've got to put their eyes on. I made him skinny and I gave him big butt. I never make them like both the same. I've got to put their eyes on. I've got 2 done. I've got the legs of another done. That's the most time-consuming part, is these little mother freaking legs. So I'm probably by this evening we'll have 3 done. And David is supposed to be off tomorrow, so I'm going to leave these so he can take pictures and put them on his Etsy. I know some of y'all have been like, I want one of those little possums. So they'll come in an air bubble wrapper, and I think he's going to put them up for like 15 plus shipping. Now listen, I'm not the best crocheter, but I know a lot of y'all think these are just flipping cute. As I do more, they get better because I've kind of perfected the pattern. So I got to give them eyes. I have to embroider eyes. But so I'm hoping to have 3 for him so that on his day off tomorrow, he can photograph and take pictures and put them on. I will continue to do them in batches of 3 to 4. And if you want to put them in your car, all you got to do is put a ribbon through their tail and hang them up. I put a magnet on one of mine's bellies and stuck it to the fridge so it looks like a skull in the fridge. But their legs move, and you can hang them by their tail. And their heads kind of look up at you a little bit. I made this one fat, though. I thought he needed a big butt. And I make them all slightly different, but they're in the same scheme of things. And this has the same number of stitches that this does. This is blanket yarn. This is worsted weight 4. This is Sabrina. Sabrina made the note that she wanted a possum the other day, and she was talking about one of these, but it's Sabrina, so I made her one of these. If you want one of these are like $40 because the yarn's more expensive. But I love the feet. The feet's my favorite part of these. The feet, the toes. I love it. And I have another Bigfoot to post on Dave's Etsy too. I'm going to give him that other Bigfoot that I named Harlan because Hank got adopted. Hank went to his forever home last week. And I'm fixing to put Harlan up for adoption because I've hung on to him. I made him shorter and fatter with longer arms and shorter legs because I thought he was cute that way. But I think I'm just going to let David post him too because it seems to be that the Bigfoot plushies sell well. So, but I made this for Sabrina because she said, I want a possum. And I was like, I'll just make you a big one. So, and here's the little ones. I've got 1 more to do, so he'll probably have 3 to put up tomorrow. So if you're one of the people that have seen my crochet and been like, I want one of the little possums, I'm crocheting as fast as I can, but the little ones take as many stitches as the big ones with a whole lot less to show for it at the end. But they are cute, and I'll keep making them. And literally as long as I can get my yarn and stuff back and not lose money on the shipping for David, then what he said he'd do, he's like, well, then you can have it to set aside for your book. Okay. So that's what those are going to be for. It's basically so he can keep me crafting or we can buy books. So it'll just take a while to acquire the money that we need for the book. That's okay. I wait really good. It's fixing to storm, and so my signal's probably going to go bad because I live high on a mountaintop where I am the electric lightning rod. So I'm going to shut up and let y'all go. But chapter 2 was a big one, and we had a lot to discuss around what chapter 2 brought out of me and my life and my world. If it applies to you when this loads, please put it in the comments. Anything you want to share, you want to discuss stuff, discuss it amongst yourselves, or leave a comment for me, and I'll pop into the chit chat too. I can't sadly comment on Sabrina's Ko-Fi page because David tried to start a page and then they shut him down in 24 hours because they said his tanning stuff was graphic. And I thought, well, do you eat spaghetti with hamburger in it? Because if you do, you're a hypocrite. But Ko-Fi is not going to let anyone that basically does any kind of indigenous fur work be on their platform, and I'm very upset with them currently. We're weeding out people we need in society because they don't seem to look like they're important. But if you know about basic skills, they're so important. And I'm just not willing to let everyone in society lose these skills. So I'm just going to keep plugging along, trying to plaster it wherever I can. If I get run out, that's fine. But I'm going to be around some corner on the internet going, we're still doing this. I probably just have talked to David that maybe he just needs to go ahead and purchase his own domain and do everything through his own domain and maybe Shopify or something rather than Etsy. And it may be something that he looks at later. Right now, he does not like social media, and he was more excited about Ko-Fi. And then when Ko-Fi did this, he's back to his, I hate the internet. Stupid. So I kind of have to drag him along in the social media world, and I apologize. If you know my husband, you know he just does, it's not important to him. And it's important to me for different reasons, but it's not important to him. Like, he can do just as much business around here, but generate less funds because it has to be a different price around here. And if he can have more sellers in various areas, he can compete at those regions' prices and make more money. But he's fine just, making what he makes. And I'm the one pushing him so that we can get out there. And, what I would like to do is, I was supposed to be taking care of him at this age because I was the one with a master's level in psychology till my body crapped out. So I would like to generate a passive income for him to where he can care for himself, at the level that I was going to care for him, especially if I'm gone. So that's what I'm trying to do. But, the man is more of a mule than me, and he does not like social media. And Ko-Fi did not help that at all. So we'll see. He is making videos and stuff routinely now, so we'll see how he does. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle. So if you think Dave needs to be more into social media, just drop a comment and say, hey, Dave, more videos, please. We actually do like you. He doesn't think anybody does. But I know it's a necessary skill, and it needs to stay in the world. And I think the old ways are coming back, probably because they have to. But I think the intelligence we are hanging on to needs to be shared and doesn't need to be scoffed at and told it's graphic. It's not graphic. It is a way of life. It's Mother Nature. And it's no different than you going out and buying a leather moto jacket that you wear with pride. I'm packing a fur purse or making a beaver hoop to display my house, or doing, a coyote jacket or coyote rug or an elk hide for a bed, or it's the usage, people. It's the same thing. Just because you don't want to see it in the process, hypocrite. So it's frustrating, but that's where we are. So I will come back as soon as I finish. I may put 3 and 4 together. As I get through the last of chapter 4, it depends on how much then rolls over to chapter 5. I may have to separate them. What I'm doing is taking it kind of a chapter at a time, and then I'll go back and reread and see what I need to pull. But we may combine a couple of chapters if they get to where they don't hold as much knowledge as we've been getting. But this is going to be put into a playlist eventually so that everybody can come and watch each chapter, and so that you can get the gist of this book. And then if you want to purchase it, it is a more expensive book. If you want to purchase it, you can go and purchase it for yourself. But just to get the gist of it, let me read it and tell you what I'm finding. And then if it sparks your, curiosity, you can go and purchase it yourself. But if I can save you that purchase, the author's probably not too happy about it, but I am. I mean, I'm not going to read it to you verbatim, but I'm going to tell you what information I'm getting. Oh, thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. Sal, it's good to see you too. Yeah, David doesn't like the internet at all. I tolerate it because I've used it so much with work and stuff. I can see the good points. David he's happiest in the woods. I mean, and I enjoy. I'm fine there too, but I'm more of a social creature than he is. He's completely fine, just saying 3 words a day, and one of those being a he's fine. He's fine, and I'm like, no. I like to communicate. So fixing to pour it down here, so I'm going to get off here before this fails. Thank you all. I appreciate you for joining in. Please go and support Sabrina over at Odyssey and over at Ko-Fi. If you want to be able to comment and do stuff on her Ko-Fi, I think the minimum is $5 to comment and see the other post. You can do other stuff there too. I would personally tell you that probably the $5 is going to get you probably more information than you could go out and purchase and consume in a year. She's just that good. But she had to slow down the trolls and the onslaught of just assaultive narratives that was against her. And I understand that. And this has been a good kind of boundary line for her. And it still lets almost, basically everyone get the information for a very minute fee. But I can't access it all because Ko-Fi won't let me with my email now because they're all intertwined. I would have to go and recreate myself online to get into Ko-Fi. And then as soon as they figured out who I was, they probably boot us again. So I don't have much trust in Ko-Fi anymore. I'm getting tired of being a bad person because I'm part of nature. It irritates me. But it is what it is. Just go on and keep going. But that's where we are. Support Sabrina. Understand that while she's being quiet, but she's still doing stuff to bring you information. So she's still researching, consuming, and digesting and composting tons of stuff and creating different educational tactics to benefit y'all. And she's really having fun with this, but it's a job for her. Like, she looks at it as a very important thing that she's supposed to be doing, and she gives it her undivided attention. So I'm thankful that she's watching my lives and trying to tell y'all here's another source. But I am in no way going to make up for what you're going to learn with her. So Ko-Fi and Odyssey synergy is where you primarily need to be. Okay, and if you want a possum, they should drop tomorrow. David should get them listed probably by midday. He normally does photographs and stuff early in the morning before he gets busy in the shop. So they should be on by midday. And if he lets me know, I'll do a post to let you all know. There will be 3 in the first drop. I don't know how many in the next one because I just have to crochet and see where I get. So possums are popping up. Just get in the line. We'll get everybody taken care of. Okay, it has gone gray here. I'm going to shut down and enjoy the storm. Y'all have a wonderful day. I appreciate you for hanging in with me, and we're just starting this book, but already I think it was probably way worth the ticket price. So I'm not mad. But we got hundreds of pages to go. We all may be changed permanently by the time we finish reading this book. May not be a bad thing. Okay, lightning. I'm going to go. Y'all be good. I love you and take care of yourselves. See you soon.